if there was something that was surprising, and it's probably part of my own makeup, is the thought of being not competent is kind of a gut crusher. That's not why people fail. It's not that somebody all of a sudden becomes incompetent in a functional way. But what does happen is people don't read the signs of the organization. They may lack coachability in that they're not seeking feedback, not absorbing it, they're not reflecting on it, not acting on it. They may not be working with sufficient emotional intelligence. People get hired for IQ, they get fired for EQ in a lot of instances.
The Intelligence Forge podcast is sponsored by Permasize AI Forge. The Intelligence Forge podcast is sponsored by Permasize AI Forge. At Permasize AI Forge, we know you're ambitious, but are manual tasks like admin, lead generation, nurturing, and onboarding holding you back from truly scaling your business? Imagine saving dozens of hours every week, freeing you to deepen client relationships and execute high-impact strategy. Our clients aren't just imagining it. They're saving countless hours per week and doubling their revenue within months. We custom-build AI automation systems that eliminate the grind. From effortless lead generation and nurturing to seamless onboarding, we give you back the most valuable resource, your time, so you can focus on building those vital human connections and driving strategic growth. Stop letting repetitive tasks limit your potential. It's time to build a business that works for you, not the other way around. Ready to unlock your true scaling power? Visit PermasizeAIForge.com and book your free AI audit call today to discover how you can save time and double your revenue. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the Intelligence Forge YouTube channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode.
Building legacy through mentorship, scaling executive impact beyond corporate life. Welcome to the Intelligence Forge, where we explore how business leaders leverage technology and innovation to scale their impact. I am your host, Emmanuel King Ibironke, and today I am thrilled to have Steve Moss with us. Steve, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you, Emmanuel.
Of course. Thank you for coming through. Steve, I would love for our listener to hear your story in your own words. Can you please introduce yourself? Tell us about Executive Springboard and what you do there.
Sure. I consider myself an Olympic-class networker. And so part of Executive Springboard, my role is matching executives with mentors who can help with their professional growth. And I work with companies that are looking at executives who may have been identified in succession planning and are looking to become ready for the next promotion. Or maybe they've been promoted or have been hired recently into a company and they need help with onboarding into that new role. And we're also working on a third area of the business, which is really about reigniting the engagement among long-tenured, highly skilled workers who may not be motivated by a promotion anymore and may be drifting into autopilot. And how do you get them enthusiastic for what they're working on?
Right. Thank you so much for summing it up.
Yes.
I love that. All right. Before we dive into the meat of, this conversation, I love success story. And that's why I want to ask you, what's the most exciting things that is happening now at Executive Springboard? Any recent win, success story, particularly that you are proud of?
Oh my goodness, there's a couple. Forgive me if I don't mention clients' names. I'll describe them, but I'm not going to mention names. We have one piece of business where it was a little bit different from our normal mentoring. The president and CEO is the sixth generation owner of a business. And we had some conversations about mentoring, and he said, yes, I could use a mentor, but at the same time, I need somebody who's kind of a confidential advisor, maybe more consulting than mentoring. Can you provide somebody with that? And one of our mentors, Joe Hanneman, I don't mind mentioning the mentors' names. One of the mentors has been working, in this case, for 3 years and is really embedded in the leadership team of that organization. And we're seeing, big turnarounds in the business. And that's one of those things that brings a lot of joy to all of us as we see the success that somebody is having, and as they try new things and take a step out, out of their comfort zone in some situations. The other thing that I've seen in the past year that's been, I guess I'd say, it's one of those things that makes me feel really good about the business. We've been in a situation where we've seen a lot of repeat business. And, as earlier in my career, I was a marketer. And so going out and finding new clients is something that I do and enjoy doing. But it's been really interesting for me to get that endorsement of clients who are coming back and saying, this worked the last time. And we have somebody now who's succeeding in a more senior role. And can you do it again with this person? So we have, I guess last year there were about 6 or 7 clients where we were doing multiple engagements with. And for most of those, we'd been with them for a few years, and they said the time's right for us to come back and work some more.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I love success stories, and it's good to start with that. All right, let's go back to the beginning. You mentioned you were the chief marketing officer 4 times before starting Executive Springboard. Now, walk us through that transition. How did you start this business, and what kind of funding did you have available when you launched?
So making that leap from marketing to what we do now, which is much more in like the human capital side. If there were 2 passions in my career, one was about building brands and the other was helping people build their careers. And I would say that through my marketing career, that first itch was sufficiently scratched, and it was time really for me to focus on the second. And also, let me share a story. It's not a success story, but it was the motivating factor for me to start Executive Springboard. With my 4th time as a chief marketing officer, I only lasted a year and a half, and this was 2009. So yeah, it was the Great Recession, and the organization had reached the end of life on some of its product lines that were highly profitable. But at the same time, there were things that I just wanted to try to figure out what went wrong. Why was it that I personally didn't have the success there that I had in other engagements? And I did a lot of homework on why executives fail in new roles. And that became kind of the germ that turned into Executive Springboard. So having created the intellectual property around how do you successfully onboard executives, and parenthetically, about 50% of new hires at a senior level fail in the first 18 months. So it's a common problem that organizations have. And I wanted to spend time understanding why and building a toolkit to try to help people get through that process. And in terms of funding, Emmanuel, this has been bootstrapped the entire way.
Wow.
There now are times where we're in a position where certainly we have access to capital. We haven't taken it at this point. And we've been managing the growth internally and self-funding it, and it's been working out for us. I suppose there could have been maybe some quicker ways for us to get to where we are now. There were lessons learned along the way that we probably had to get to for us to be able to deliver the satisfaction to our clients that was important. So I don't regret the time it's taken for us to get to where we are.
All right. Thank you so much. But if you fast forward to today, where are you at?
Where are we at? We have about 100 mentors. I can't say we have 100 engagements. That's not the model for most of us. Who are working at Executive Springboard. This is part of a portfolio of roles that people have. So I'd say 85% of the mentors are either now out of corporate life and consulting or retired. So this is part of the portfolio that they have. And we have right now probably about 20 active clients. And, there is me doing a lot of the business development and the operations side. I do get a little bit of help, but for the most part, the heavy lifting and the work is being done by the mentors and the engagements that they have.
All right. Thank you so much. I mean, that's a big transformation looking at where you started from and where you are today. But thank you so much for sharing.
And it's also, I'd also say, it's as part of the transformation, and a lot of people do this as entrepreneurs. they've been in big companies, right? So I was in companies. My last role, it was a $2 billion company. I had worked for companies that were part of multi-billion-dollar companies. Nestle was one. Diageo was another. So big companies, and learning about how to run things on your own, a very different experience for sure.
Thank you so much. The magic wand question, it's your turn to answer. So if you have a magic wand today and you could instantly improve one thing about Executive Springboard's operation, whether it's matching processes, mentor coordination, client communication, what will it be and why?
Wow, a lot of things, but I'll talk about something that I've been personally working on the past year. One of the things you just mentioned is one of those. So I'm fortunate to have created this network of over 100 extraordinarily talented people who've all been successful in their careers. Kind of what's at the heart of being able to, for an executive, be able to say, I understand how this person can help me in my job. So it's an embarrassment of riches that I have in terms of these wonderfully talented and involved mentors. But what I had was over 100 relationships of them with me, and not necessarily them with each other. And because the work that they do is often this individual, they're working individually with an executive. We've set the business up that way. But there was a big piece of value add that I wasn't delivering because I didn't work on creating a sense of community within that organization. And that's really what I've been working on the past year, is keeping people much more in the loop, having regular dialogues with them, training sessions, interactive discussions that we might have on certain topics. When I travel somewhere, getting the people from whatever market that is together so they get to meet each other. And that even, I had something today where I introduced two of the mentors. They didn't know each other. One lives in Wisconsin, the other lives in Connecticut. But they're both facing a similar situation. In one case, the person from Wisconsin has been worked with somebody almost all of last year. And that person re-upped. That person wants to extend their mentoring relationship throughout 2026.
Right.
And we have toolkits that we use depending on the path that somebody's on. If somebody is doing onboarding, it may be one direction. If somebody's getting ready for that promotion, it may be a different direction. And she's finished her script with this person that they've grown in the organization. They're on the senior leadership team now. And she is seen as a trusted advisor and is being asked to continue to make her impact over the course of the year. Well, we have another mentor who went through the same thing, who started with somebody who had been identified as the future CEO.
Right.
They worked to prepare him for that role. When he became the CEO, he went back to Mark and said, I have things that are coming at me in real time now. I need your help, navigating through some of the issues that I'm facing. And Mark did that. So we went from development to onboarding. And then after that, the CEO still wanted to have that connection and having somebody as a sounding board. So the mentor, Mark, continues to play that role. Well, Mark is now in touch with Kathy, the other mentor, so they can share the points that they have in common here and work together. It's a good thing, and they're learning from each other, which is very gratifying for me.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that. So in that case, what will your magic wand be?
My magic wand is going like this and creating connections within this group that I had. And that was something that was missing before. The only connection was generally with the mentors and myself.
Oh.
And so I'm not necessarily taking a step back, but it's doing something to include everybody together and welcome dialogues and create the opportunities for them to get to know each other and to learn from each other.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Your profile mentions some powerful statistics. 77% of companies report mentoring boosts retention, and mentored executives are 5 times more likely to be promoted, From your experience working with Fortune 1000 companies, why do you think there is still such a gap where 76% of employees want a mentor, but only 37% have one?
Wow, I think there's a few reasons for that. First, organizations have pyramids. So the higher up you go in an organization, the fewer people there are to do the mentoring. So there is a supply and demand issue. And that's one of the things that Executive Springboard tries to address, because we're generally not working with the junior people in the organization. We're working with the people who are at a higher level in the organization. I'd also say that while a lot of people might see the benefits of mentoring, when they get senior, they're less likely to ask for a mentor internally, because the mentoring process requires a level of transparency that's really difficult to do with somebody who someday might become your problem in the organization. So I think that happens. The people who are most likely to be mentors are people who've been mentored themselves. So they had that experience, they recognize the value, they go forward and do it. For some people who've never been through what mentoring is, it may seem like a cost without necessarily recognizing the value. You know, when we do work with executives who are onboarding into a new role, and about 50% of them fail in new roles without a mentor as part of the process, it's easy for the company to say, well, 50% of them succeed, so it must be the problem of that individual rather than something we're doing. Companies are putting way too many obstacles in the way of success.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think I agree with you. But I'm intrigued by something you said earlier about how your last CMO role, lasting only a year and a half, that now became the catalyst for this entire business that we are talking about today. What did you discover in your research about why executives fail in new roles that others weren't seeing?
Yeah. If there was something that was surprising, and it's probably part of my own makeup, is the thought of being not competent is kind of a gut crusher. That's not why people fail. It's not that somebody all of a sudden becomes incompetent in a functional way. But what does happen is people don't read the signs of the organization. They may lack coachability in that they're not seeking feedback, they're not absorbing it, they're not reflecting on it, not acting on it. They may not be working with sufficient emotional intelligence. People get hired for IQ, they get fired for EQ in a lot of instances. What I saw in my own situation, I think as much as anything, was I was lacking political savvy. There were things, and I'm not using politics in a negative sense. It's all about influence and understanding where that influence might be in an organization, and where maybe I was missing some things, where initiatives I was putting in place were causing friction in parts of the organization, and leaders in other parts of the organization responded in ways that I didn't even recognize at first. So I think there's that. There's cultural agility that comes into play as well. All of a sudden, you can't come into an organization and necessarily change the culture unless you're the CEO. A CEO can do that, but most of the time we have to adapt to the culture that's there and understand what those unwritten rules are to make things happen. The fifth thing that I would say as a big factor in why people fail is getting change management wrong.
Okay.
And I find that often we feel like we can be a hero if we beat expectations of when change will occur by a few weeks. And in the process, the shortcuts that we might take cost us the alignment that we need in an organization. And without that alignment among the people who are going to do the work, the change agenda that somebody has is doomed for failure.
Okay. Thank you so much for breaking it down. Okay, let's talk about how executive retention and development directly impact companies' growth. When companies come to you, what's typical, the breaking point that makes them say, we need Executive Springboard? What pain are they actually experiencing at that moment?
Yeah, there's a few things that are kind of interesting. What I see and what works best is when somebody, it's not pain so much as an opportunity that they want to grab hold of. And I bring that up because here's a difference between what we do, and we call this mentoring versus coaching. Right. And coaches generally go through a training process. They get their certification. They're wonderful at asking the questions that will lead an executive on their own path of discovery. And I have quite a lot of respect for what they do. Mentors' credibility comes probably not from their training, but from the experience that they share with that executive. So they've been there and they've done that. And that makes a difference. The reason I bring this up is not much of the work we do is remedial in nature. So it's not like somebody is in a position where there's a problem that, yeah, they may very well have things that they have to work on to develop. But I may be of an age where if you said to me, as my boss, if you said to me, Steve, I want to give you a coach, the thought bubble to me might be, what did I do wrong? And we want to get out of something remedial and make that something that we bring people on the journey. So there are needs that I would separate from pain points. There are needs to continue the development of people in an organization. How do you get people who are director level or maybe vice president level now ready for the next position? They've been identified. The organization has a lot of faith in them. Can you give them a sounding board? Can you give them a helping hand to be able to get them ready for the next hurdle? So it's not so much that it's not so much that we're building a skill set. Functionally, that's probably already there. When you get to an executive level, it's more leadership that comes into play than anything else. And we're trying not to work with people who've dug themselves such a hole that our job is trying to get them out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it's trying to find those folks who are on the right path. But the organization, if I said to you, Emmanuel, I think you're going to be ready for a promotion in a year.
Right.
My organization should be doing something to, in fact, make sure that you are ready in a year. So we don't want to have that same conversation a year from now and say you're still ready in a year because we haven't done anything to prepare you. So that's kind of how Executive Springboard can play a role in it.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I'm not sure we have this kind of service too many that personally that I've heard of. So I think what you're doing is very, very valuable. And I wonder if a lot of companies are taking advantage of this because it's going to really do a lot to them. But thank you so much for sharing that. All right. You mentioned that only 47% of onboarding programs last more than 1 week. Yet, 72% of CEOs claim onboarding is critical to retention. That's a massive disconnect. How does that challenge impact your client's bottom line? And what does executive churn actually cost this organization?
Yeah, so if you think about it, some of the pieces that would be involved. Let's say an executive lasts only a year in an organization. Well, it would be fair to say that the cost of salary, all compensation, is a sunk cost, right? That's part of that cost. You paid for a search. You're going to have to pay for another search. Yeah, some search firms will give you for a certain period of time a guarantee to offer the next search for free. What we've found is most companies, if things don't work out, will blame it on the search firm and won't go back to the same search firm for the next search because they figure, oh, this one's for free. We'll get the same strategy. They'll look at the same people, but it will be done by the most junior person in the firm. They end up paying full price for the next search as well. Those are pieces that are tied directly to that individual. But think about it. If someone is struggling, there's an impact on revenue that the organization has. There's an impact on retention of other people. Most people leave an organization, probably the number one reason has something to do with their boss. So if somebody is struggling and perhaps isn't handling it the way they should, it's not just trying to fix them or manage an exit. You're dealing with the churn that is happening throughout the rest of the organization too. So somebody who makes $250,000 and 40% short-term plan, and then put on top of it the cost of 2 searches on both sides, and then add to it the costs of a couple of other people in the organization who've gone away, and the costs of the inefficiencies, the lack of productivity, et cetera. It's easily well over $1 million that somebody is going to cost an organization if things don't work out. And do we have a perfect record at that? No, and I would imagine other organizations that are doing the same kind of work as we would be able to quote kind of the same numbers we have. Generally, it's over a 90% success rate. We have about 90% of the clients that we've worked with. If I looked at that 18-month figure, over 90% are still there. So, in terms of risk mitigation, it's a pretty good story. And then the question is, okay, for us, how many people are interested in hearing that story?
Wow, that's really fascinating. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move forward. You mentioned this interesting challenge about succession planning for your own business. You've built something with 100 plus mentors, intellectual property, processes, but here is the question. What if the biggest threat to Executive Springboard's longevity isn't finding a successor, but rather that you've created a business too dependent on your personal network and relationship? How are you systemizing the business development and matchmaking process so it outlives any single individual?
It's a marvelous question, and I wish I could give you an answer that says, I've got that all figured out. I don't, but certainly there are parts of that come into play. One is, I hope that when it comes to the business development, it's not all Steve knocking on doors. That's something that is shared with the mentors, with strategic partners. So there are other people who are out there besides myself who are telling the story of the value that Executive Springboard can make for their clients, for their organizations. And I think that's a big part of it. Listen, you hit on another thing that is really kind of critical. I'm not an operations guy. And so making sure that processes are well documented for whoever will take over after me is something that I'm working on right now with one of my mentors, who may be somebody who is interested in taking over Executive Springboard after me. What I've tried to do in this is make a business, create a brand that's not dependent on my personality and the success that we have. The magic happens in the relationships between the mentors and the executives that they're working with. And if organizations see that, we've been demonstrating there's a good chance that we get the repeat business there. So I think there's all that. The operations side is something though that in a business this size, and as it scales, and what I do know is the next person who is running Executive Springboard, probably by their nature, will do a better job of it than I have.
For sure. I believe that should be your wish, if I have to put it that way.
Yeah, that would be another magic wand for me. Yeah.
All right. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, Steve, you've worked with hundreds of executives over the years, and you've helped a lot of people. If you're sitting in front of any executive today, what is one piece of advice that you're able to give them, or maybe any business owner that you think, based on what I know, based on my experience, if there's one advice, I will tell you ABC, what would that be?
Don't ever forget to keep it real, be authentic. What I see a lot, and we do this, we do assessments on this, is understanding the needs that a company has. And so there's a friction sometimes between who the company needs me to be and who I am. And figuring out a way to meet the company's needs while staying true to who you are is the critical piece of this. To me, if I had to define leadership, it's really about authentic self-expression that provides value. And addressing the need of the company is where that value comes from, but it is all about authenticity at the same time.
I love it, authenticity. Thank you so much for that piece of advice. All right, where can our listener connect with you and learn more about Executive Springboard? And if someone's listening right now and thinking, my organization needs the kind of support that you offer, what's the best step in contacting you?
Yeah, well, send me an email. And my email address is oss@execspringboard, springboard.com. I'll get back to you within a day. And if this is, would love to have conversations with people either about the need they have or what's working well for them, because that's one of the things I think about a business like this is we're constantly learning, and we hope that we're in a situation where we can share that learning. So in a phone call, if one of your listeners here is interested in a conversation, a Zoom call, a phone call, whatever it might be, I'm open to hearing what's on their mind, seeing if there are things that we can do to help, and learning from them on what's been successful for them as well.
All right, thank you so much. There still is one question that I think I would like to slink it. I would like to still ask you, if you don't mind, probably in 60
Go
seconds.
ahead.
Okay, what keeps you up at night? Is there any one challenge that you think if you are able to solve it while you are still running Executive Springboard, it will definitely make it like icing on the cake for you?
Boy, what keeps me up at night? Some of that has shifted in the past year or so. In the past year, more than a year ago, it was, are we getting the amount of business that we needed to? And we've been growing nicely now. So I don't think it's that as much. I want to just try to make sure that we keep the quality of work that we have, and that the executives that we work with continue to feel like this is something that is worth their time, and that they're growing through what we do. The companies that we talk to, what I would say is almost all of them have a bandwidth issue. Those who are tasked with managing the talent in an organization have way more on their plates than they can do themselves. And I think we've created something to help them address that, because there's, with over 100 of us, and most of them able to handle more than one engagement at a time, we're there to try to solve the problems that people have.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really love our conversation. And I think all our audience, we feel the same, because the insight that you shared today, your journey, I believe it's very valuable. And I think, and I know actually that our audience will find it really impactful for them. Steve, I want to thank you so much for coming through, taking time to talk to us and to share your insight. And we only wish you well as you go along in your future endeavor. And I want to see Executive Springboard, getting to the next level, especially when it comes to the succession planning, in terms of who takes over, let this brand continue to shine beyond many, many generations. I think for me, I would love to see that. But I want to thank you so much for coming through, and we will stay connected.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. It's been great to have a chance to talk with you today.
Thank you. All right.